Betrayal within. Men who killed their families. Welcome to Odd Occasions, where we uncover the darkest and most perplexing stories in history. Today, we delve into the chilling accounts of men who committed the ultimate betrayal, turning on their own families and destroying everything they were supposed to protect. What drives someone to commit such horrific acts? Is it rage, despair, mental illness, or something even darker? Each of these 10 stories reveals a unique and deeply unsettling narrative of love turned to tragedy. Let's dive into the shocking and devastating cases of men who annihilated their families. Number 10. Charlie Lawson, the Christmas Day Massacre. On Christmas Day, 1929, a quiet North Carolina farm became the site of one of the most horrifying family massacres in American history. Charlie Lawson, a 43-year-old tobacco farmer, killed his wife, 6 of his children, and ultimately himself, in an act that has haunted Germantown for decades. In the days leading up to the massacre, Charlie's behavior was curious, but not alarming. He took his wife, Fanny, and their 7 children into town to purchase new clothes and have a professional family portrait taken, a rare luxury for a working-class farming family in the Great Depression. This would later seem like an ominous farewell. On Christmas morning, after sending his 16-year-old son Arthur into town to run an errand, Charlie began his rampage. He first shot his daughters Carrie, 12, and Maybelle, 7, as they walked to visit a neighbor. He then hid their bodies in the tobacco barn, crossing their arms and placing stones under their heads. A chilling act of deliberate staging. Returning to the house, Charlie shot his wife, Fanny, who was on the porch. Inside, chaos erupted as his children tried to hide. Charlie hunted down and killed his daughter Marie, 17, and his sons James, 4, and Raymond, 2. His youngest, 4-month-old Mary Lou, was bludgeoned to death. After arranging their bodies in the barn, Charlie walked into the woods and ended his life with a shotgun. Arthur, the sole survivor, returned home to find the horrific aftermath. To this day, Charlie's motive remains a mystery. Some speculated that a head injury he suffered months earlier caused a mental break, while others point to allegations of incest between Charlie and his eldest daughter Marie. Whatever the reason, the Lawson family tragedy remains a grim symbol of familial betrayal. Number 9. George Emil Banks, a man on a mission to save. In the early hours of September 25, 1982, George Emil Banks, a 40-year-old former prison guard, unleashed a killing spree that left 13 people dead, including 5 of his own children. His actions were fueled by a warped belief that he was protecting his children from a cruel and racist world. Banks, who had a history of mental instability and violent tendencies, had been drinking heavily and taking prescription pills. Armed with an AR-15 rifle, he began his rampage at his home in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. His first victims were his live-in girlfriends, Dorothy Lyons and Sharon Mazzillo, and their children. He shot and killed them, as well as other children in the home, including a niece. From there, Banks drove to a mobile home park to find his ex-girlfriend, Sharon Mazzillo, their son Kismayu, and her relatives. Breaking into the home, Banks killed Sharon, their son, and her sister and nephew. The massacre was so swift and brutal that neighbors initially believed it was an explosion. Banks fled, triggering a massive manhunt. Eventually, police cornered him at a friend's house. After a tense 8-hour standoff, during which police used deception, including a fake radio announcement claiming his children were alive, Banks surrendered. During his trial, Banks argued that he acted out of love, sparing his children from suffering. The jury sentenced him to death, but he was later deemed mentally incompetent for execution and remains in prison. Number 8. James Urban Ruppert, the Easter Sunday Massacre. Easter Sunday 1975 should have been a day of celebration, but for the Ruppert family in Hamilton, Ohio, it became a bloodbath. James Urban Ruppert, a 41-year-old unemployed man, killed 11 members of his family, making it one of the deadliest family massacres in U.S. history. James lived with his mother, Charity, and often clashed with her and his older brother, Leonard Jr. While Leonard was successful, married, and had 8 children, James struggled with failure, bitterness, and dependence on his family. Charity frequently threatened to evict him, and Leonard openly criticized his lack of ambition. On April 30, 1975, after a particularly heated argument, James reached his breaking point. Armed with a .357 Magnum, 2 .22 caliber handguns, and a rifle, he went downstairs as the family gathered for Easter dinner. Within 5 minutes, he shot and killed his mother, brother, sister-in-law Alma, and all 8 of Leonard's children, who ranged in age from 4 to 17. When police arrived, James calmly surrendered. He initially refused to cooperate, offering no explanation for the killings. His trial resulted in a conviction for 2 counts of first-degree murder, while the other 9 charges were dismissed on grounds of insanity. James remains in prison, eligible for parole in 2025. Number 7. Abel Clemens, a grisly 19th-century nightmare. In 1805, in what is now Morgantown, West Virginia, Abel Clemens carried out one of the earliest recorded family annihilations in U.S. history. Overwhelmed by financial hardship and paranoia, Clemens killed his pregnant wife and their 8 children with an axe as they slept. Neighbors described Clemens as increasingly erratic in the days leading up to the massacre. He had expressed fear that his family would starve and that only death could save them. The following morning, Clemens confessed to a neighbor, saying he had been compelled by divine orders. Clemens was swiftly convicted and hanged in 1806. His story is a haunting reminder of the devastating consequences of untreated mental illness in a time with little understanding of psychological disorders. Number 6. George Jefferson, Hassel, Secrets and Slaughter. George Jefferson. Hassel's life was a trail of failed marriages and violent tendencies, culminating in one of the most shocking family murders of the 20th century. In December 1926, Hassel's wife, Susie, accused him of molesting her daughter. Enraged, he struck her with a hammer, then turned his fury on her 8 children, killing them one by one with a razor. Days later, he killed his stepson, who had been absent during the initial murders. To cover his tracks, Hassel buried the bodies in a root cellar on his Texas farm. When neighbors became suspicious, authorities uncovered the grisly scene. Hassel confessed not only to these murders, but also to killing a former girlfriend and her 3 children years earlier. He was executed in 1928, leaving behind a legacy of horror that continues to chill Texas history. Number 5. Ronald Lee Haskell, A Lone Survivor's Courage. On July 9, 2014, Ronald Lee Haskell set out on a meticulously planned act of revenge that would leave 6 members of the Stay family dead and 1 lone survivor fighting for justice. Haskell's ex-wife, Melanie, had left him months earlier after enduring years of domestic abuse. Seeking refuge, she moved to Spring, Texas, to live near her sister, Katie Stay, and her family. Melanie thought she was finally safe. Haskell, however, was not ready to let go. Disguising himself as a FedEx delivery driver, he arrived at Katie's home that afternoon. 15-year-old Cassidy Stay answered the door. Initially, she didn't recognize him, but when Haskell revealed his identity, he forced his way inside at gunpoint. He tied up Cassidy, her parents, Katie and Stephen Stay, and her 4 younger siblings, Brian, 13, Emily, 9, Rebecca, 7, and Zachary, 4. Haskell demanded to know Melanie's whereabouts. When no one would provide the information, he made the family lie face down on the floor. In an execution-style massacre, he shot each of them in the back of the head. Miraculously, Cassidy survived by playing dead. Despite being shot, she managed to call 911 and give police critical information about Haskell's location and his next target, her grandparents. Haskell was apprehended after a standoff with police. Charged with 6 counts of capital murder, he is currently awaiting execution. Cassidy's bravery became a symbol of hope, and she later credited her survival to her belief that her family was watching over her. Number 4. Simon Peter Nelson. Murder in the midst of divorce. Divorce is often fraught with emotion, but in January 1978, it became the trigger for an unspeakable tragedy in Rockford, Illinois. Simon Peter Nelson, a 42-year-old father of 6, couldn't handle the news that his wife, Anne, was planning to leave him. In a fit of rage, he made a decision that would destroy his family forever. On the night of January 7th, Anne called her sister from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, expressing fear that Simon might harm their children. Her instincts were tragically correct. Early the next morning, Simon brutally murdered all 6 of their children, aged 3 to 12, and even killed the family dog. Armed with a rubber mallet and a hunting knife, Simon attacked each child as they slept in their beds. His brutality left the local community reeling. After the murders, he drove to Milwaukee to confront Anne, but police arrested him before he could harm her. Simon was sentenced to 100 to 200 years in prison, and despite being eligible for parole numerous times, he was denied repeatedly. He died behind bars in 2017 at the age of 85, leaving a chilling legacy of violence sparked by rejection. Number 3. Mesach Damas, a father's unfathomable wrath. On September 17, 2009, Mesach Damas committed one of the most horrific family murders in recent history, leaving behind a crime scene that stunned Naples, Florida. Damas, 33, killed his wife Gerline and their 5 children, ranging from 9 years old to 11 months, in what he later described as an act of God's will. The tragedy began with a fight. Gerline had told Damas she was leaving him, and he flew into a murderous rage. Purchasing a fillet knife and duct tape, he methodically killed each family member, starting with Gerline, whom he tied up and stabbed in the neck. He then moved through the house, killing their children one by one, ensuring none were spared. The following day, Damas fled to Haiti, where he was apprehended by U.S. Marshals. Extradited to Florida, he confessed to the murders, showing little remorse. After years of delays in his trial, Damas pleaded guilty in 2017 and was sentenced to death. His courtroom demeanor and statements, including his claim that the killings were directed by God, cemented his place as one of Florida's most chilling family annihilators. Number 2. David Ray Conley, a 9-hour hostage nightmare. On August 8, 2015, David Ray Conley carried out a calculated and horrific act of vengeance against his ex-girlfriend, Valerie Jackson, and her family. Conley, enraged by their recent breakup and resentful of Jackson's parenting decisions, broke into her Houston, Texas home and unleashed a nightmare. Conley armed himself with a 9mm handgun and handcuffed Jackson, her husband Dwayne, and her 6 children in the master bedroom. Over the course of 9 agonizing hours, he tormented the family, executing each person one by one. Witness accounts suggest that Conley forced Valerie to watch as he murdered their children. A chilling detail emerged during the investigation. Valerie had managed to send a text to her mother during the ordeal, alerting her to the hostage situation. Police conducted multiple welfare checks but were unable to gain entry to the home without a warrant. On their 4th visit, they saw a body through the window and entered, but it was too late. Conley surrendered after a brief standoff and was charged with capital murder. Prosecutors are seeking the death penalty, though Conley's defense team has argued insanity. The case remains a stark reminder of how domestic violence can escalate to unimaginable extremes. Number 1. John Hoskins, a turn-of-the-century horror. On the morning of January 11, 1919, John Hoskins committed an act of shocking brutality that left his Iowa community reeling. Overcome by anger during an argument with his wife Hulda, Hoskins grabbed a wooden buggy axle and attacked his family. Hoskins first struck his stepdaughter Gladys over the head, killing her instantly. His stepson Roy tried to intervene but met the same fate. Hoskins's biological children, Irene and Merlin, fled the house, but he chased them down. He struck Irene but failed to kill her, and she escaped to a neighbor's house to seek help. Merlin, terrified, followed his father's orders to ride to his uncle's house and report the killings. Meanwhile, Hoskins returned to the house, delivering more blows to his stepchildren's bodies to ensure they were dead. When Hulda returned, she too became a victim of his rage. After killing her, Hoskins attempted to slit his own throat with a straight razor, but failed. When authorities arrived, Hoskins was arrested and later convicted of murder. Incredibly, after serving his sentence, he was released and lived with his daughter Irene in California. A shocking and bizarre ending to an otherwise tragic story. Thank you for joining us on Odd Occasions, where we explore the darkest and most unsettling tales from history. These stories remind us of the fragile line between sanity and chaos, and the devastating consequences when that line is crossed. If you found this episode hauntingly intriguing, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that shine a light on the eerie and the extraordinary. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.